It's time for another collaborative podcast that no one asked for. Get ready for Creators United. And now, give it up for your host.
Welcome back to Creators United. Normally I have a co-host with me, but not this episode. This is actually the first Creators United episode that I've done by myself. Luckily, we have a guest, and it's a legendary guest at that. This guy's resume is unbelievable. Storyboard artist, VFX artist, head of story at I forget the name of the company. Third Floor.
The third floor, yeah.
Please welcome Mr. Doug Lefler. How you doing, Doug?
I'm good. How are you?
Very good, very good. I see a piano behind you. Are you a musician? Is that your studio there?
Not a good one. Yes, this is my studio, but the keyboard actually occupies too large of a portion of the frame. If I had composed this picture as a storyboard, I would say I'm making it too important, and it's not telling the correct story. The drawing board in back there is much more important.
Yeah. I saw your Instagram. You post a lot of are they paintings?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's start there. I assume that you started drawing when you were very young as a child. So just tell me a little bit about when you figured out that you could draw.
I don't think there was anything unusual about me drawing. I think most children draw. I think the only difference is I never put the crayon down. It's interesting because when people tell me that they think I'm talented, I know they mean it as a compliment, but somehow it also implies that it was easy, and it never was. It's just, I've been doing it a very, very long time, and you're bound to learn something. You talked about the piano. It's like the way I know that I'm an artist and not a musician is that I can play the keyboard for 15 minutes and I'm like, okay, I'm done here. But I'll be drawing for 2 hours and thinking, I should sit down and step away from my drawing board, but I'll just go a little longer.
Yeah. That's the same thing with me, actually. I started teaching like myself the piano last year, and I'm still not very good at it.
People tend to think I'm being modest when I say that. All I have to do is talk to my wife and they'd realize that the truth is I'm not a modest person. So if I was any good at the keyboard, I would brag about it. So trust me, if I say I'm not good at something, I'm probably not good at it.
Yeah. I did
But
want to talk to you. Oh, what were you gonna say?
just about drawing. It's like growing up,
Yeah.
periodically in my life, though, I've met people that I really did think were talented, for whom the whole process came much easier than it did to me. Uh, and I would just be amazed. It's like how somebody could be so good when they hadn't spent the hours working at it that I had. And but also most of those people that I've known along the way, they didn't do much with it. It was more a hobby. And I guess maybe if a skill is hard earned, it sticks with you longer.
Right.
Or maybe you just invested so much time in it that you're stubborn, you don't want to give it up.
I think a little bit of both, maybe. Um, I did want to ask you about uh CalArts, your college
Mm-hmm.
days. That's actually in my notes. That's the first thing I wanted to start with. But interviews never go the way you want to sometimes.
Sure. Yeah.
It's all conversation. You know what I mean? Um, and I know recently, I think it was in October 2025, you had the A113 class reunion. So what was it like watching some of your old like high school and college films that you guys made?
Well, that was a little scary. However, seeing everybody again was great. It was
Mhm.
kind of like picking up on a conversation we had left off 40 years ago and just finishing the story that we got interrupted in. It was wonderful seeing everybody again. Some of the stuff actually held up remarkably well. Not a lot of people were able to find their pencil tests. I did find mine and a number of other things along with it that were scarier than my CalArts stuff. And I got it all transferred because it was so long ago. It was all on film. Or I
Yeah.
did actually get some of it transferred to VHS tape about 30 years ago. But now it's digitized, so I have access to it. It was a remarkable group of people. However, none of us knew that at the time. When we started at Keller, so it was 1975 was the first year of the first class there. And I think that there were about 24 of us who started the program and about 18 people that finished. If you go back to that time, there wasn't a lot going on in animation. I mean, Disney was the only game in town, and it seemed like
Right.
Disney's best years were behind it. So none of us knew if we were going to have careers or if we would have jobs or what was going to happen as a result of this, or if it's something we'd want to be part of. The big renaissance in animation was ahead of us, and uh, partially because of at least some of my classmates, more than more than me. But um, yeah, it was an interesting time. But what made it so special, I think, is that because this program had not existed before we started it, all of us had come to the attention of Disney by virtue of something we had done on our own. We had made our own films, but we had reached out to Disney. We showed them something we had done. And because of that, I think that there was a caliber to the people in our first year class that was quite remarkable. And then we fed off of each other. We really learned as much or more from each other as we did from our teachers, although we had some excellent teachers, a few.
Yeah. You got Disney's attention by going to a was it an Imagineering seminar or something? Like
Yes.
wasn't an Imagineer talking?
I don't know if I'd say we got their attention. We went to one of my art teachers took my little filmmaking group. There were five of us or four of us by
Mm,
that time, with her to an art teachers convention that was being held at the Disneyland Hotel. And at
mm,
that hotel, there were people from what was then called WED Enterprises, and now called Disney Imagineering. WED stood for Walter Elias Disney, but it was the division of Disney that planned the theme parks. And so there were people giving lectures and demonstrations of different things, mechanical effects, and just the creative process. And after a lecture by John Hench, who I believe was vice president of WED at that time, I went up to him as he was coming off the stage and I told him, that my friends and I made films and we wanted to know if we could get a tour of WED. And he said, yeah, call my secretary on Monday. We'll set something up. So Monday I called and we arranged to go have a tour of the facility on Flower Street in Burbank. And we all lived up in Santa Barbara. So we drove down. We went on this tour. We had somebody from PR taking us around. He was very nice. And when we were done, we said, we brought our films with us if you'd like to see them. And he said, they're 8mm films. And he said, oh, I'm sorry, we don't have an 8mm projector. And I said, but we brought one with us. So
mm.
we brought the projector in and
You
we set it
prepared.
up in one of the conference rooms and we started showing our little 8mm films. And, we were teenagers in the mid 70s, but and we had very little money to make movies with at that time, but we did some clever things visually. And we had a lot of stop motion animation in a couple of them and enough things that got Disney's attention. And as we were showing these films, it was right around 5 o'clock, if I remember correctly, and some of the show designers were leaving their offices or going home, and a couple of them stopped into the conference room. They saw us showing our films. And they just walked in and sat down and watched. And one of them was an artist. Later, I found this out was Exitencio, who was one of the show designers, and he called up Ed Hansen because he knew that Disney was looking for potential students for this new program. And
Right.
so a week or so after that, when I was home in Santa Barbara, my mom found me and said, "Hey, there's a guy on the phone that says he's from Walt Disney Studios and he wants to talk to you." And I said, "Are you sure it's not one of my friends playing a prank on me?" And she said, "I think it sounds like an adult and he sounds serious." So I got on the phone and Ed Hansen, he said, "So what's the big deal? You showed your films to WED, but you didn't bother coming and showing them to us." He was acting like he was pissed at me, which at that time I didn't know Ed's sort of dubious sense of humor. But I said, "Well, I'm glad you showed them to you, Mr. Hansen." And so and he warmed up after that. And he let me know he was just joking. But so we went back to the studio and we showed our films again and we brought a bunch of artwork that we had done for projects that we were planning. Uh, And then we all, maybe a month after that, got invitations to submit portfolios to the studio for this new program. Now, did not have the intention of going into animation at that time, but I did draw, and I did, as I said, I did stop motion animation, so I was interested in animation. And more than anything, I wanted to work in the film industry. My lifelong ambition at that time was to get a job at a film studio. My parents had said, because we didn't know anybody that worked in the industry, there was no way I could get a job in the industry. So that was my
Right. It's hard
ambition.
to, yeah, it's a hard industry to break into. I mean, I'm certainly not in the film industry whatsoever, but I would like to be, and it is definitely a hard industry to get into. Any industry really is. You gotta
I'm sure,
know the
yeah.
right people. Yeah.
And so when a studio called and said, "Would you send a portfolio?" I said, "Of course." And so I sent my portfolio. And then a few weeks later, I got another call saying they were going to give me a full scholarship. And Ed Hansen said, "I'm not going to say where you were. I'll say you weren't at the top of the list, but you were pretty close to it." Okay. I guess that's a
Yeah.
compliment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I ended up going to CalArts and being part of this group, and we were not really welcome at CalArts by a lot of the other students at that time because they saw us as sort of commercialism,
Mm.
infringing on their creative school. Uh, and one of the guys that I
Creatives
met,
invading an art school.
yeah, I know. One of the guys from the art school. They had a film school, an art school, a dance school, a music school, and a theater school, and we were in the
Right.
film school, even though we were studying art mostly. But one of the guys, one of the other students from the art school said, "Your program doesn't belong in this school." And I said, "Well, why not?" He said, "Because animation, the way you're learning it, is a craft and not an art." And I said, "How do you take craftsmanship out of art? I don't understand that." I mean, you learn the craft so that you can rise above um, the level that you need to. That it's limited by your skill. Now, anyways,
Right.
it was an interesting time, but we did
Yeah.
have some extraordinary students alongside of us.
Yeah. Of course I want to talk more about your career in general and the other stuff that you've done outside of Disney, but myself and this audience are big Disney fans, and myself, I'm very inspired by the A113 class. Actually, I named my Studio A113. Actually,
Oh, cool.
the room that I'm sitting in right now. Actually, um, so one thing I heard about, and I like to ask people who were in CalArts at this time. Whenever I interview them, I like to ask them this if they were part of this group. Um, I heard that you guys would have some very late nights sometimes working on like, you know, Bill Moore's design class or something. So were you part of the group that went to Tiny Nailers a lot?
Well, I did go to Tiny Nailers, but I was definitely not part of that group. I once tried to do an all-nighter and I didn't make it. I I realized when I was at CalArts that I'm much more of a morning person. So
Mm,
I would go to bed early, then get up very early. That had two benefits. One is that's the early hours of the day were the time when I functioned the best. I still function the best in the morning, but also that meant that I could have my dorm room or my apartment to myself for the first several hours of the day, which was great
that is pretty
when I
smart,
had
actually.
when I
Yeah.
had a roommate. Uh, but yeah, I did not function well at all nighters, so that was kind of a click that I wasn't even a click. I mean, anybody could have done it. I just didn't function well under those circumstances,
Right,
and
right.
I never have.
So you were picked many people call them the original four that came out of CalArts. It was you, Jerry Reese, Brad Bird, and
John Musker.
John Musker. Yes, thank
Yeah.
you. For some reason, I thought Lassiter for a minute, even though I know that he
Nope.
was not in that group.
He was not.
So, did it surprise you that Disney picked you as one of the first four?
um, I wasn't surprised that they picked John and Jerry. Brad
Mm,
came to find me. Brad had been my roommate for the second half of the first year. our first
Mm.
year colors, both of us had roommates that we had issues with, and so we ended up uh, rooming together for the second half of the first year. So Brad came to find me at the end of the second year, and he said, "You, John, Jerry, and I are wanted in Jack Hanna's office." And I said, "Why? Are we in trouble?" And he said, "I think Disney's going to offer us jobs at the studio." And I said, "Brad, you're crazy. They're going to offer jobs to John and Jerry, but they're not going to offer jobs to you and I." But Brad was right. I was wrong. And yeah, so we went there, and they asked each of us, says, "Would you consider leaving school to come work for us?" And I said, "Let me think about it. Yes."
Yeah, it's not something you have to think about long.
But yeah, it was very disappointing to my mother, who said, "Honey,
Mm.
you've got to get a degree." And I said, "No, I don't. Actually, this will be much better than getting a degree. Then at least I know I'll have a job and I can pay off my student loans." I
Right.
think I had $2,000 worth of student loans at that time, which 1977 seemed like a huge amount of money. And I was
It's not
desperate to pay it
bad.
off. No, it's not bad at all. But it seemed like a lot to me at that time. So
Yeah, yeah.
1977, the four of us got hired, and that was the year Star Wars came out. Um,
Right.
we all went and saw it together at the Chinese theater, and it was very exciting to be starting your career at that time in Hollywood, because you felt like all the rules had just changed.
Hmm. Is that what kind of got your interest started in wanting to be a VFX guy?
Mm, no, I mean, I had wanted to be Ray Harryhausen when I was a teenager.
Mm.
That was my interest in stop motion animation. I mean, I loved it. I loved his films from a very early age, and it took me a long time to figure out even how stop motion was done or what it was, because there was no internet in those days, and very little printed material on the subject. So it took a while to kind of learn enough to figure out how you did stop motion, how you built the miniatures, and a lot of experimentation. So I think my interest was there, but I started to feel like the reason most visual effects films didn't work wasn't so much because of the quality of the effects as it was the quality of the storytelling. And I
Mm.
had noticed that if a story worked, you'd forgive bad effects, and if a story didn't work, you'd blame the effects. So I had, by the time I went to college, I'd already started to veer away from wanting to be a visual effects artist and towards being wanting to be somebody that planned the best way to utilize visual effects and storytelling. But I did want to work in live action more than I wanted to work in animation. But again, like I
Right.
said, my life's ambition was to someday work at a film studio. So I was 20 when I got hired at Disney, uh, and I was working at a film studio. So I had achieved my life's ambition already, and I figured I had to retool my aspirations.
Right. Now you went into the storyboarding department, right? In the story department. You
I
didn't
did.
really become an animator per se.
Um, well, first of all, I at that time Eric Larson, who was one of the nine old men, was running the training department at Disney, and it
Oh,
was
right,
wonder.
right.
Everybody who worked with Eric Larson loved Eric Larson. He was just great. But then, so I did two pencil tests there, and afterwards, Frank Thomas asked me to be his assistant, and I was Frank's assistant for the first three, or I'm sorry, for the last 3 months of his career before he retired, and then he and Ollie wrote The Illusion of Life, which they were working on at the same time. Then I was working in animation and still working on it when I'd actually segued into the story department. So after I finished working with uh, Frank Thomas, I was given to Ron Clemens to be his assistant. And at that time, Ed Hansen had said, "Ron seems like he's kind of losing his passion for animation, so maybe you can help reinvigorate him." Now, unfortunately, I was always much more interested in storytelling than I was just in animation. So it was not a good strategic move to put me and Ron together, because all we did was talk about story all the time. So it's like, okay, I guess we should get back to work and do this animation. But whenever we had spare bandwidth, we would discuss storytelling and story structure and ideas. And so I think I'd been there about a year or more, and I had asked to move into the story department. I thought I'd do better there. And eventually I did get to move from being an assistant animator to being a whatever the lowest level of story artist, sketch artist, I think it was, working on The Fox and the Hound. And I was put in a room with Pete Young, who I loved working with Pete Young, and I was very fortunate to have that opportunity.
Right.
But what was so great for me about Disney at that time is that the films were written in the storyboard process. We did the storyboards first, and the script came afterwards, and that changed later. That was in some ways similar to what Marvel used to do when Stan Lee would work with Jack Kirby, where he would just like have an outline, and then Kirby would work out all the storytelling, and then Stan would come in and write the dialogue afterwards. So we would work out all the beats of the story, and we'd even write dialogue and pin it up underneath our drawings. And then eventually somebody would come in and transcribe it into script format so that the voice talent could read it. So for me, storyboarding was always more a process of writing than it was of illustration. So you have mentioned that you've seen my Instagram accounts. You
I have.
know, I love illustration. I love to draw. I love to render. But if I find myself making pretty storyboard drawings, I usually think it's a sign that something's not going right on the process. Because
Mm.
as a storyboard artist, my deliverables are not drawings, they're ideas. And so any work that I put into a storyboard to make it pretty is time I'm not spending coming up with more ideas or better ideas or working on a different part of the story.
Yeah.
In fact, in some of the live action films I've done is I've gone back and looked through my portfolio, and I have found there have been a few films, not many, but a few where I had focused a lot on making my storyboards look pretty. And I think one thing that I figured it would be a good thing to have in my portfolio, but it was also an indication that I didn't like the people that I was working with. And so in those cases, what I would do is I would punish them with pretty drawings. Whereas if I really liked the people I was working with, my drawings were really rough and loose, but I do a lot more of them and explore a lot more possibilities. I would give them more ideas to solve production problems and enhance storytelling.
Yeah. I'm looking at your portfolio resume for storyboards on your website right now, and there's just it's very helpful because there's a long list of all of your movies that you worked on. And I found that IMDb can be very not great. And so I appreciate that you put this on your website because many people don't even have a website, or if they do,
Yeah,
they don't put this stuff.
yeah, it's
So
kind
it's
of an
very good for
antiquated
research
idea.
purposes.
And I'm not
Yeah.
entirely sure that that's up to date. And I never put everything on my. I think it mostly just has my feature films. Uh,
Yes, correct.
but it's probably a more complete list than is on the IMDb page.
Okay. Um, I do want to go through some of these movies catch my eye. Um, Now I know that Third Floor, that your head historian obviously does a lot of the Marvel movies. Have they done every Marvel movie? Or
No, they haven't. And
okay.
I'm not at the third floor now. I was for
Oh, okay. I thought
14
he oh.
years, but um, they don't have a story department anymore. During the strikes, it was just becoming very difficult
Mm,
to run the business. I was an expensive commodity on their payroll,
mm,
so I left the company. Um, Although I still work with them. And in truth, the last couple of years I was there, most of the jobs that I did for the third floor were was work that I brought to them. Or somebody wanted me to work on a film, and since I was at the third floor actually got the business uh, because of that. But yeah, there's been a number of Marvel films that they haven't done. They have done a lot, and they're a
mm.
good company. I really did like. I felt very fortunate
They do good
to
work.
work work with them. What I think that they're good, their supervisors are really good, and their supervisors, for the most part, are good storytellers. And I think that's one of the difference between them and a lot of other previous companies. They really focus on the filmmaking and the storytelling. I mean, I'm all of them do, but I feel like that maybe the guys at the third floor had more training, and
Right.
they had the benefit of me kind of pushing them in the right direction too.
Yeah. Speaking of Marvel, you do have the Avengers on your resume. Great
Yes,
film.
yeah, it was a great film.
Um the BFG, that's an underrated movie. I like that movie. I saw
Oh,
that in
let's talk
theaters
about the
actually.
BFG. Yeah, so
Yeah, go ahead.
I've done two feature films with Spielberg, and I did a little bit of work on one of their Apple TV projects. But
Mm,
yeah, I did the BFG and I did Ready Player One. But the BFG was a wonderful experience, and that had a lot to do with the fact that we were working with Melissa Matheson as our screenwriter, and Melissa had well, she had been married to Harrison Ford for 17 years. Uh,
mm.
and while she was visiting the set, I think during Raiders of the Lost Ark, she got involved in writing the screenplay for E.T. And is that she's the screenwriter of E.T. and Indian in the Cupboard and the Black Stallion and numerous other things. But working with Melissa was just wonderful. She was so collaborative, and she was like sitting in the room with us most days, working with us as we were storyboarding and doing previs. Um, yeah, so that was really a great experience. And she also just had wonderful stories to tell about
Definitely.
part of Hollywood royalty, I guess. But just
Yeah,
she's
yeah.
also a wonderful person. And unfortunately, she passed away before the film came out.
Oh.
And but yeah, so that was a lot of fun, and it was fun working with Stephen. Um,
I'm gonna have to rewatch that movie because it's been a while since I've seen that, and
yeah,
I remembered liking it.
I felt like it could have been better. I think part of they were making the film in a different way. They were actually using virtual camera, where they actually created a digital environment. They gave
Mm,
Stephen an iPad that was his camera, let him set up all the shots. And somehow I think if we had just storyboarded that and prevised it in more of a traditional way, I have the feeling it would have been a better film. I just felt like the camera moved too much and it became more about shots than it did about the emotion of the
right.
storytelling. And I'm sorry about that because it was such a fun film to work on.
Yeah.
Uh,
You also have Wayne's World. Wayne's World is one of my favorite movies actually, and you have that on here.
yes.
What was it like working on that film? I'm sure it
Well,
was Mike Myers in like the storyboard room or did
yeah,
he
because he was a producer on it. I had no
I
idea who
thought
he
so.
was at the time. I think I should say that Saturday Night Live aired in 1975
Oh
when we
yeah,
were at
October.
Cal Arts. We used to gather in the common room around the TV on Saturday nights to watch it because it was this new thing, and it was so
Yeah.
much a part of the culture at that time.
Have you
But for
seen the
many,
movie? Have you seen the movie Saturday Night?
no,
It's
you mean
about
the
the
one
it's
about
about
the
the first episode, yeah.
yeah. Oh yeah,
It's
okay.
good.
Is that Dylan O'Brien is in that, right?
I think
Playing
so.
Dan
Yeah,
Aykroyd.
that was pretty good. Yeah, that came out a few years ago. That was a good movie.
Did you ever see Love and Monsters?
No.
No, okay. So for all of your listeners out there, anybody who hasn't seen it, watch Love and Monsters right now.
Love.
It's a film that came out during COVID and it just got lost because of that. But Dylan O'Brien is in it. And uh, the reason I'm talking about him so much is Dylan O'Brien is also in the new Sam Raimi film that I just worked on, Send Help, which is coming out later this month. So
Oh,
Dylan O'Brien
awesome.
and Rachel McAdams. But yeah, so Dylan O'Brien, I believe, was in the Saturday Night Live movie that you're referencing, and he's in this film, Love and Monsters. And it's one of these surprisingly engaging stories that kind of like Galaxy Quest. It shouldn't work, but it really does. So
He
yeah,
was. He
what?
played Dan Aykroyd.
Yes, okay,
Yep.
cool. Um, Yes, I didn't see that movie, and I know we that was sort of a tangent we got onto, but
You're all good.
where we're talking about Wayne's World. Yes.
Oh,
So
yeah, Wayne's World.
what you have to understand about Wayne's World is I was working on Sam Raimi's movie Army of Darkness.
Mm.
I had started on that film as a storyboard artist, but Sam gave me a chance to be the second unit director on the film, so I was able to segue into directing from that job. But it was a non-union film. Sam wasn't even in the Directors Guild at that point, and I was getting paid my day rate for doing storyboards, but we weren't working every day. So I would maybe work 1 or 2 days a week to do the second unit, but I really wanted to do it. And we were shooting mostly at nights up in Acton, outside of LA. So during the day, I needed a job just to make money.
Mm.
So I took a job doing Wayne's World at Paramount, and I was sleep deprived for most of that. And I do remember meeting Michael Myers and not knowing who he was, and I'd never seen Wayne's World. So I'd asked him to give me a videotape of just a bunch of clips of it so I could get up to speed. Uh, well, my most vivid memory was sitting in a trailer there where they'd given me a desk to draw my storyboards and looking out the window and seeing a bunch of Klingons drinking coffee because they were filming one of the Star Trek series at that time. I can't remember which one they were doing. If it was uh, uh, Next Generation or Enterprise. I don't know at
Well,
that time.
it probably would have been Next Generation. That
Next
stopped in
Generation.
94.
So the sound stages where they were filming were there, and there was just it was I guess a break in between shots, and all of these people in Klingon makeup were standing outside my window. But I was so sleep deprived, I didn't know if I was just imagining it or it was a very surreal experience.
Just yeah, yeah. One more thing that about that film before we move on. There's one scene in that movie that's absolutely brilliant where it's probably my favorite scene in the whole film where they're talking about sponsorships and they're saying that they're not going to bow down to any sponsorships and he's wearing like a whole bunch of Reebok stuff and then he has like a Pizza Hut. Who came up with that bit?
Not me. I'm sure that was Mike
Okay.
Myers. Yeah.
Yeah. Probably. That's so funny. It's a great part of that movie.
Mike Myers, when I met him, he was actually very humble and modest and oh yeah, don't treat me like I'm anybody special. And I had no idea who he was, so it was very easy for me not to be intimidated. Oh, and I thought, okay, I'm supposed to know who this person is. I really should, but I've never seen him before.
Yeah. I also see Oz the Great and Powerful on here. I remember when that movie came out and that was everywhere at Disney World. They had like a garden, like little garden thing at Epcot. They were promoting that a lot.
Yes, I did do some work on that. Mostly it was concept. I think I worked. I don't. I think I only worked on that for about 2 weeks. And again, that was another Sam Raimi movie. I had a pretty well established relationship with Sam at that time, and so I was asked just to come in, read the script, and give ideas. Uh, and I don't know if any of my ideas for that film made it in to the final
Mm.
product.
One more movie that I see on here is X-Men Days of Future Past. It's
Mm-hmm.
probably that's a great movie.
It is
That's
a very
probably my
good
favorite X-Men film.
man. That was the second film that I did with Bryan Singer.
Mm.
First one was Jack the Giant Slayer, which I worked on lot longer. But yeah, yeah. So one of the things that I'd love to do is to take sequences that hadn't been really scripted yet, or where the script was not really a good representation of the film. So one of the
Mhm.
sequences that I worked on um, extensively was there's a fight in a conference room with Mystique
Mhm.
when uh, she's trying to assassinate Peter Dinklage. And that sequence is one that I pretty much created. I think all of it, what I drew was not scripted, but it went kind of from me to the second unit director. I think was Randy Smers, I believe was the second unit director. So it is very close to the storyboards. again, coming from Disney, I always thought of storyboarding more as a writing process. So I'd love to be given sequences that where there wasn't, where there were no script pages yet, or where the script needed to be reworked, and I could just write it with pictures.
Right.
So that was one of the. I mean, I worked on a number of sequences for that film, but that's one of the ones I think I may have had the biggest impact on.
That's the Days of Future Past is the one that has the Sweet Dream segment or sequence, right? The or the yeah, where the I forget his name, but he stops time
Oh,
and he
you're thinking of
rescues everybody.
Quicksilver. Yeah.
Yeah.
That time in a bottle sequence you're thinking of.
Time in a bottle. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, let's
Thank
talk
you.
about
Yes.
that because um, that sequence was really created by uh, one of the previs artists at the third floor, um, who I had nothing to do with that sequence. It was all done in previs.
Mm.
And I am blanking out on the name of that artist. He's great. He even came up with the idea of this song. Uh, it'll come to me and I'll tell you. It's just trying to think about it.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
blanking out, but
It'll
yeah,
come to
but
you like after after this.
he really deserves all the credit for that sequence. He conceived it, he did it all in previs, and like I said, he even came up with the idea for using that song "Time in a Bottle." Um, and he's a director too, and I mean he has directed his own like short films. Very talented guy, and I'm very angry at myself for not having his name on the tip of my tongue. But yes, that's the best sequence in the film, I believe. I wish I could say I created it.
So you mentioned Sam Raimi. Great director. I noticed a lot of his movies, including Spider-Man, is on your resume. So I
Mm-hmm,
assume you have a friendship with him, a good working
mm-hmm.
relationship with him. Tell me how
Yeah.
that relationship started.
Well, it started on Army of Darkness.
Mm.
Uh, he was working with a company called Intravision, and Intravision had a front projection process at that time. And I had worked with Intravision before, so I knew how the process worked. And more importantly, I knew what the process could and couldn't do well. So the people that owned that company had approached Sam and they said, Intravision can do anything. And then they hired me and they said, don't draw anything we can't do. And had I been hired by Sam directly, probably the first thing I would have done was try to convince Sam not to use Intravision exclusively for everything in the film. But I should be grateful to the company because it did begin this relationship. And now I ended up storyboarding the entire film with Sam, and we worked together very well. We had the same kind of dark sense of humor, I believe. Uh, and as I said, I had the chance to direct a second unit on that film because of the work we did together in story uh, when we were storyboarding the film.
Right.
And Sam had given me many other opportunities. I ended up, after being the second unit director on Army of Darkness, I directed a second unit for a TV pilot that they were working on called Mantis. And then I went to New Zealand and I was given the opportunity to, well, first direct second unit on a couple of the Hercules made for TV movies. And then I directed the fourth Hercules made for TV movie. And that was a great experience. Um, and then later I also worked on a Simple Plan. I directed second unit for Sam on that, and then I did storyboards and second unit on Spider-Man. I was one of like 5 second unit directors, but
Yeah.
only 2 of us
Where
got credit.
But that's good. At least you got credit. A lot of people don't. So, where was where was the second unit for Spider-Man? Was that in
You mean
that
what did I
wasn't in it.
shoot?
No, like where was the location? Like where was the set for the second unit?
Well, it was pretty much the same places as main unit. We actually did a
Okay.
lot of uh, one of the main things I did is I shot a lot of the montage of Spider-Man when he first is Spider-Man, when he has the full
Mm,
costume and
mm-hmm.
he's rescuing people, being the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. So the armored car robbery sequence, the Korean deli, there's a woman that's being mugged on the street. There's a whole like montage of Spider-Man being Spider-Man, and I had directed that. At the same time, Sam was shooting main unit, but we were over on the Warner's lot for a lot of that.
Mm,
They had rented out part of the Warner Brothers back lot, which was convenient for me because Warner Brothers is about 5 minutes from my house, whereas
oh,
Sony
there you
is
go.
like an hour from my house. So,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's very
um,
convenient.
yes, then we went to the Museum of Natural History where we shot a lot of the second unit for when Peter gets bitten by the radioactive spider. I did stuff in the cage fight with Bonesaw McGraw,
Yeah, yeah.
Randy Savage. Uh, that was fun. And
Yeah,
that
yeah.
was on this. That was on the Sony lot in the soundstage there.
Well, those are all great scenes. So, I mean, all of them are scenes that I would want to direct if I was directing Spider-Man 2002.
Wow.
So I am on your page here, your website, part of the website that list all your directing work, and you mentioned a lot of them, and I'm just gonna be honest, I have not seen a lot of these. I should have watched Dragonheart, um, but I got busy, so I'm sorry.
No
I will
worries.
watch it, I promise. Um, let me I wanted to ask you. I recently did an interview with Bill Croyer and I asked him the same
Uh,
question too. Um,
Let me stop you for a second and come back.
sure, sure.
Austin was the name of the previous supervisor that came up with the Quicksilver scene.
Oh, okay.
Austin Boateng, I think is how you pronounce his last name. Yeah, he's great.
Okay.
He's a very, very talented guy, and I
Yeah,
kick myself for
absolutely.
not remembering that name immediately. Yeah. So, anyways,
Yeah, there
Bill
you go.
Croyer,
I'll
yes,
I'll
great,
I'll take
great
I'll
guy.
take that name and I'll put it there so you don't yeah, there he is. Yeah. That's a great
Just
book. That's
I
a
just
great
started
book.
reading this. Yeah, I'm very anxious to read. Good friend of
Yeah.
ours,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
his wife Sue.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, so I asked him this question and he gave an interesting answer. I was wondering what you thought of it too. Uh, do you, and I think I know the answer to this. They're both they're kind of same, but they're kind of both very different parts of filmmaking, storyboarding and directing. Um, do you prefer when working on a movie, do you prefer to be the director of it or do you prefer to be in the storyboard room, storyboarding the movie?
um, I really love both jobs. Storyboarding in some ways allows me to do all the parts that I enjoy without having to deal with any of the parts that I don't enjoy.
Any of the
Directing,
egos of the actors?
you know that interestingly enough, I almost always got along well with actors, and I never thought I would because I'm not an actor. I'd never taken an acting class in my life. It was a big surprise to me that I found I had a good relationship with actors. Uh, it was more dealing with. But here's the thing about being a professional director. It's one of the few jobs where you spend more time not doing it than doing it. Like you spend most of your professional life trying to get your next gig.
Right.
And when I was doing television, it was good because I would go from show to show. So I got to spend a lot of time learning my craft and working on set and working with actors and staging shots and I enjoyed that. But directing feature films for most of us was a very expensive hobby. It's
Mm.
kind of the sport of kings. Usually, when I did a feature film, I was out of work for a long time after that before I got another job.
Uh-huh.
So but more significantly, it wasn't really what uh, I had set out to do. I like to draw and I like to write. Uh, so when I can do those two things, I'm happy. And it was difficult on my wife and my dogs for me to be out
Mm.
of the country as much as I was. I mean, my wife is the daughter of an art teacher, and being married to an artist was something she was very comfortable with. Being married to a movie director or TV director was a little bit outside of her wheelhouse. And
Too
although
glamorous.
uh, actually she's pretty glamorous herself, but
Yeah, yeah.
And people assume when she would come to this set to visit me that she was my girlfriend and not my wife, and that she was probably a wannabe actress that was hanging out with me because I was a director, which was not at all the case. Um, that she liked meeting actors when the actors were nice people, and she just like couldn't be bothered if they were, you know, too full of themselves or just not nice people. For
Yeah.
instance, she really liked Colin Firth. We spent a lot of time with him um, and a number of other British actors when we were making The Last Legion. But yeah, she wasn't enamored. Jean-Claude Van Damme came over to our house one night to talk to me about a project which we didn't end up doing together. And she's just saying, like, I'll just stay in the back of the house. You guys do your thing up there. Oh, yeah. So she's very much not swayed by the glamour of showbiz. But yeah,
Mhm.
so I did not intend to be a director. It just kind of happened. And I'm very grateful for the time I did. I was director for 15 years. And I got to direct 4 Academy Award winning actors and work on a lot of television. I did the pilot episodes of both Hercules and Xena when we went to series on that. Um, so yeah, I was very fortunate to have had that experience. And it
Yeah,
also
absolutely.
allowed me opportunities to do more writing too.
Mhm. Since you enjoy writing so much, have you ever thought about writing a book?
Yes,
Are you
um,
writing a book?
I have the first draft of a novel here.
Oh, amazing.
Um, yeah, here it is.
Amazing. Is it fantasy or is it your
It is.
story?
It is a fantasy story. It's
Okay.
actually, yeah. Maybe I shouldn't say too much about it now.
Can
Um,
you
yeah,
give us a little bit? Can you give us a little bit of the plot?
I wanted to write something that was just fun. That was my only
Mm,
criteria. So the
right.
idea I came up with was a high fantasy spy novel.
Oh, there you go. Writing the next James Bond.
Characters very much they not James Bond. He's an amateur that gets kind of recruited in. He's actually a
Okay.
linguist. But so I finished this. I gave it to some friends to read, and I've done a second draft. And then I decided that I would try to rough out a second book before I went back to polish this draft because I feel like so much of what's important in this is going to be the world building. So yes,
Okay.
and then I
Do,
also have done
go
graphic
ahead.
novels and comics and things like that. I'm always creating my own content, and I've
Yeah, yeah.
written like 20 screenplays over my career.
Yeah.
This our house actually we bought when one of the scripts I wrote back in the 80s got made into a movie called Steel Dawn. It was starred
Mm,
Patrick Swayze. Um, the money I got from that became the down payment for our house that we're still in
nice.
today.
Nice, nice. Have you ever thought about writing your story like a biography?
um, Not so much. I mean, I've written a few pieces on my website about things that, like when I first started at Disney, you might have seen that.
Hmm.
Um, I have thought about writing more about the art of visual storytelling. Uh, I,
Mm,
I, I love to talk about that, just the craft of it. And but yeah, that's I haven't actually. Well, actually, let me back up. I'll tell you, I did start to work on a book back before I worked with Sam on Army of Darkness. There was a time when, after years of writing screenplays and drawing comics and doing all of these sort of side projects, that I think benefited uh, my understanding of story. I still think the best way to learn how to tell somebody else's story is to learn how to tell your own stories.
mm,
Uh, but there was one point when I decided I was going to focus just on being the best storyboard artist I could. So to that end, I started to write a book about storyboarding, and I came up with what I later called the 3 laws of storyboarding, which are uh, make it read, make it work, make it engage. So and those laws came to the 3 disciplines of storyboarding, which are drawing, storytelling, and filmmaking. but because I started writing this book, I found when I would work on films, I could talk much more intelligently about the process. And I think there was a direct correlation from me working on that book, for me getting my first chance to direct second unit on Army of Darkness. I think I could articulate my ideas, my thoughts about storytelling filmmaking because I was putting it into a book form. So then I started directing and I never finished writing the book, but I think that there was a direct relationship to that. So someday I may write more of a how-to book on visual storytelling.
Mhm. I need to read something like that. So if that ever comes out, I'll absolutely read it because I started for my so this podcast is a side thing for me. The main thing that I do is on YouTube. I make uh mini documentaries essentially. Just no budget, just YouTube videos. And I just tell stories on different it started off it started off with just theme park attractions and telling
Mhm.
the history of them, and then they very quickly branched out into anything in pop culture or media, and like people. I tell a lot of like actual people stories, uh, and I recently took a whiteboard that I had laying around and started. Before I started writing the script, I literally write out the timeline of their life essentially, and I call it
Yeah.
my storyboard, but it's not really. It's
Yeah, it's a
uh,
board for your story. Yeah. Yeah.
right. um, I do want to real quick before, and I'll let you go here in just a minute, but my last question here is something that I both saw pictures of on your Instagram, and I saw your logo is of a little. I think that's a dragon.
It's
Yeah,
a
that's a.
Rhamphorhynchus. It's a pterosaur, dinosaur
Oh,
on a
okay.
falconer's
Oh,
balloon.
dinosaur.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And it mentioned it somewhere on your I think it was in that about section that as a kid, if I have this correct me if I'm wrong. But as a kid you were very into falconry. Is
I
this
was,
still
yes.
a hobby of yours at all?
Uh, no, when I started into filmmaking, I realized that I could not serve both masters because to be
Mm,
a falconer just required so much time. You cannot keep a bird of prey and not fly it every day and take.
right.
I was just while I was doing that, I was very dedicated. I was a young teenager at the time when I did that last. But I do have some pictures of myself on a couple of the movie sets of things I've directed. I've had falcons, and I usually would get a picture of myself with a peregrine falcon. I have one with an eagle. Um, so yeah, it's something that I loved doing uh, in my youth, um, and I still think it's great. But I don't practice it now. I have two
Yeah.
dogs, and
That's enough.
that's enough. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh um Yeah, I mean, thank you for joining me today. This was a lot of fun. You mentioned you have a film coming out later this month. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, well, it's not my film. It's Sam Raimi's movie, but the movie Send Help, which is starring Rachel McAdams and Dylan O'Brien, who also starred
Hmm.
in Love and Monsters. Go watch that. Um,
Oh, I definitely will.
uh,
I will put that on my watch list right now so I don't forget actually.
uh, yeah, so that is well, I worked on it, so I may not have the greatest amount of objectivity, but I think it's a really good movie. It's a very compelling. It was a very compelling script. Um, and Sam's a great director. You'd be very hard pressed to find anybody in Hollywood who doesn't enjoy working with Sam Raimi. And I've been fortunate to have done quite a few projects with him, including we worked on Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness.
Oh, right. Yeah. Um, I need to watch that. I was just talking about that movie to somebody actually. I need to watch that again because I barely remember it. I remember liking it. I just haven't seen it since it was in the theater. That happens with
Yeah,
me with a lot of movies
it
actually.
was interesting because Rachel McAdams, of course, was in that too. So I was storyboarding a lot of
Oh
the scenes
yeah.
that she was in uh, for that film, and then I found myself storyboarding a business for her for Sent Help too. So
Yeah.
I don't know that she's done a lot of fight sequences in her career, but I probably have storyboarded all of the ones she has done.
Well, my friend, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you taking the
Thank you for
time
having me.
to talk with me. If anyone's curious, wants to see your work, either go on Instagram, Doug Lefler, or what is Doug Lefler dot yes,
DougLeffler.com.
DougLeffler.com.
That's
Yep.
pretty easey. I also
Yeah.
actually had started a YouTube channel just where I was talking about storyboarding and visual storytelling, called Stobo Dart. Uh, I I did it for a while and I found I really disliked recording myself on video. Even though I loved talking about the art. Um, but
Yeah.
there is there's some information there just about storyboarding, storytelling, directing, screen direction, drawing.
Yeah.
Uh,
I have it pulled up right now. I'll absolutely check some of this out. And I will leave that linked in the description as well in case if anyone wants to see it. So,
right. Well, thank you very much for having me on.
hey, thank you. And
And
everybody
go watch
listening,
Love and
thank you all for
Monsters.
listening. Yes, yes, go watch Love and Monsters.
Go watch Love
Absolutely.
and Monsters.
Everybody listening, thank you all for listening, and we'll see you all in the next one. Ryan and Scott, I miss you.
Ryan and Scott, I never met you, but I miss you too.